Welcome to Say More, the Powerhouse podcast dedicated to elevating the voices and journeys of women striving for the C-suite and those who've already conquered it. Brace yourself for candid conversations, illuminating interviews, and unfiltered insights as we delve into the triumphs, hurdles, and invaluable lessons learned along the path to success. Join us on this empowering journey where inspiration meets empowerment and wisdom reigns supreme. Get ready to ignite your ambition, harness your potential, and thrive alongside your sisters on Say More. Welcome to another episode of the Say More podcast, powered by Envision More Consulting Group, where we bring your bold visions to life. It is so exciting to be joined by an amazing conversationalist today. I know each time I share with you all that, it's not going to get any better, or maybe we're at the top of our list, but no, we're exceeding it yet again. I am so excited to go into the conversation with our guest, Dr. Jermaine Smith Bell. And it is just wonderful to hear. I know a little bit, we talk about sneak peeks. I know a little bit about her journey, but I wanted to make sure that we enjoy this treat together. And part of doing this, as I want to remind our listeners, if you're new to the fold, is that Say More really what came about as an opportunity to make sure that women are supporting one another, regardless of where you are on your professional journey, that there is a story. We all have one, and it's important that we're using that to lift others up. And I am so grateful that there are so many women across this nation that have said yes and have agreed to share, really, and recognizing that this will enlighten or even lighten the path and load for those of you that may be going through something very difficult, or you may be on the other side of something that was very difficult. We all have an opportunity to give back. And so without any further ado, I love to get a fun fact out there first to try to just, serve as an icebreaker. So what is that fun fact about yourself that most people don't know, but our listeners will get a chance to learn about you today?
That actually made me scratch my head just a little bit. But before I do that, I want to thank you, Dr. Kimberly Moore, for the opportunity to be here with you and to be able to share with your listeners across the world. So that is just amazing. So congratulations to you. So this fun fact. Like I said, I had to scratch my head. I even asked my daughter, like, what's fun? She looked at me like, you're not fun. And I'm just like, well, thank you so much. This 17-year-old. I got a card the other day that actually was a bookmark that said, my daughter introduced me to myself. So maybe, yeah, isn't that cool? But anyway, fun. Isn't that cool? I couldn't leave it behind. I just thought random bookmark came to me and I was just like, yeah, I need to keep this. And I keep it on my desk now. So random fact is that because of the work that I do and, being in community, people expect you to show up a certain way. So when I go on vacation with my family, I do tend to do some things that, not debauchery, let's be clear, right? But we're not entering to that world, but definitely some little bit more fun things like, jumping off boats, even though I cannot swim.
Oh my gosh.
I'm willing to swim in the middle of the ocean. Again, not a great swimmer, but you put the life vest on, snorkel gear, it keeps you afloat. We could do this, right?
It gives you that superpower that makes you like, hey, regardless, we can do this. And listeners, I hope that you're hearing this kind of this streak about her that she's willing to take on the unknown.
Yeah, let's just try it, right? As long as we put the appropriate safeguards and, barriers in place, I'm just like, what's the worst thing that could happen? Right. Yeah. So my son said to me, well, the worst thing that could happen is that your life vest, goes one way and you go another and it's over. And I was just like, thank you so much for that, fulfilling thought as I float here in ocean water that I clearly cannot even thread if I wanted to. But I do like to do that. I like to, when it's time to not do this work, is to disconnect and just be either by myself. I like spending time by myself, actually. Yeah. And then spending time with family. So that's important to me.
I love that, and I love that you shared that. Would you also, just to level set the group and that of listeners, could you provide us with a quick snapshot of that leads us to your current role too of your career journey, so that they can kind of hear it and feel connected to it along the way?
Not a problem, Doc. So for me, I am a social worker. So I grew up in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands, born and bred. My family is from Tortola, British Virgin Islands, and they immigrated to St. Thomas. I was actually the only child born in St. Thomas. I am the last of five children. My parents, thankfully, are still alive. They're 92 and 86 and doing very well. So I do come from a family that has some longevity to it. So we'll see how that works out in my favor. But in terms of and I share that personal part because I think a lot of times we, get to the professional part, but our stories of origin shape so much of who we are and what we do. And I'm sure we'll get into some of that.
So true.
Uh, yeah, it absolutely does. And I often say to people that many times when things get a little hazy or fuzzy or unknown, when I go back to the why, that why goes back to the 10-year-old Jermaine. And I think about what those experiences were. But even fast forward, I moved here in high school. I went to 4 different high schools. So I definitely know what it's like to be on the outskirts of stuff
Yeah.
in high school. Never good, never good, but I made it through. Started at University of Miami because I thought I wanted to be an architect. I thought I wanted to be an architect because I had read a book called Kafir Boy that talked about the perspective of apartheid from a 10-year-old perspective, a Black South
Yeah.
African perspective. And I said, well, apartheid will end in my lifetime. I knew that.
Yeah.
And I would move to South Africa and rebuild all these shanty towns for Black folk. That's what I
Oh
thought.
my goodness.
That was my thought. That was absolutely it. Got into University of Miami School of Architecture, and in the first year figured out that I could speak and express myself much better than I could draw, and this probably was not the profession for me. So that went downhill, and then I ended up where you live at Florida State University. So I've spent my time in Tallahassee, undergrad and graduate work. So undergrad in business communication, graduate work in social work, then moved to South Florida, got married here, lived in Broward County this entire time. Met my husband he went to Florida A&M University. So we joke and say we met on the tracks, but we actually met because I started an organization called Sisters, which is actually now in multiple states across the East. And it's really amazing to me after 30 years how many young women have gone through this organization that was literally started in my dorm room. But we met at an event that was a part of that organization. So he kind of knew what he was signing up for. So near 30 years, a little over 30 years now, we're still together. We have 2 children. I've been a part of the Urban League movement since 1996. I started off as a social worker, making $20,000 a year, working with women, well, girls really, and then moved through the organization for the last 18 years as its president and CEO. So that's a little bit of the story.
I love that story, and I love how you shared from the origin, and it's so important. And I think for a lot of people, they see it wrapped in a bow because it's social media, so it looks like you got there overnight. I love how you share the progression. I love how you incorporated family as well. And though we talked prior to our conversation, in setting up for their podcast, I did not know that we had the FAMU connection as well. So I was a trustee at Florida A&M University, the #1
Oh,
HBCU in the nation for 10 years. So that's so great that we got that Rattler spirit that we're sharing as well. So good, good, good. So
absolutely.
audience, take
Absolutely. And
note
we
of
have a
this
few
again.
nephews that are there. We have a few nephews who is at Florida A&M now, in the Marching 100, a couple of other grads. So shout out to Florida A&M University.
Absolutely. Shout out where it's all happening, where we're creating that great talent every day, changing lives, creating great futures. So, wow. Listeners, this is going to be a great conversation. I certainly feel one with it, and I know that you will connect with it as well. So, we will transition. I'm going to refer to you as Jermaine, and I'll be Kim for the rest of this way. So,
I love,
being the
I love it.
youngest administrator and the only woman to lead an Urban League affiliate in Florida, can you tell us about some of the unique challenges that you faced on your journey to the C-suite?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually really interesting when I came into the role as CEO. And just for perspective for the listeners, when I came into the role, at that point, I was the only woman and the youngest at the time. And literally, I think all the men, maybe with the exception of one, could have been my father.
Oh
So
my
that just
gosh.
gives the perspective of the age range of the folks that we at the time had within the organization in the state of Florida, being very specific. And just for the listeners to understand, the Urban League of Broward County is an affiliate of the National Urban League. And in terms of that, there are 90 affiliates around the United States, and there are 8 affiliates in the state of Florida. So that just kind of gives a
Oh
perspective.
wow.
And our affiliate here in Broward County, or Fort Lauderdale, Florida, was founded in 1975. So when I think about that journey to the leadership role, I'll tell you, Kim, this is the thing that I remember distinctly. My predecessor had asked me to bring a document to him at a regional meeting that was being hosted here in Fort Lauderdale. And I peeked into the room, and this, of course, was years and years
Yeah.
before I became CEO. And I didn't see many women.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of men. And I thought, and when I say I didn't see many women in the room, this was a gathering of all the CEOs across the nation.
Oh
And I
my
think,
gosh.
yeah. And at that point, when I peeked into the room, they might have gone someplace else. I saw probably a handful of women. And in that moment, I thought, maybe this isn't going to be the place for me to be able to make a mark, right?
Yeah.
Again, because I'm not seeing myself. So I think for me, the journey of being able to visually see, or not see, in that case, myself represented in a room filled with great talent really registered for me in a way of thinking, do I and can I belong? And I was really blessed to have a leader at the time, a male leader at the time, that really saw talent in who I am,
Yeah.
and who I was at the time and who I am now, because we're still in great relationship, to encourage me, to not allow that to dissuade me from
Yeah.
wanting to be part of this movement. So I would definitely say the trajectory hasn't necessarily been a straight path, but it's been one that has been encouraging. I've been surrounded by individuals, both men and women, who have allowed me to be my authentic self. And by doing that, has been able to really help me move forward. And I really hope that your listeners across the board, regardless of who and what you see in the room, don't count yourself out. I have a saying that I don't tell myself no. You have to tell me no. You got to put hell in front of it and an exclamation mark on the other side for me to even believe that you really mean.
I love that. And again, the power that's coming from this conversation, and just for our listeners to hear that just because you don't see you yet, it doesn't mean that there's not a space for you and place for you. And then the encouragement, though this podcast is geared towards women, and we've talked about it before with our other guests, that there, it certainly doesn't mean that there are not any men and male champions out there, because that's what I've seen along my career journey as well. It has been
Mhm.
men that have said that, know what, not only is this a place for you, I am going to make sure and work very hard that you get and arrive at that place safely. So I love that. I love that you've shared that. And listeners, again, tune in, save, record, make sure you're sharing, because this is certainly a shareable episode. Jermaine, when you think about strategies, what strategies did you employ to overcome some of the challenges, and what advice would you give to women who are aspiring to, similar leadership roles like the one that you hold?
Well, first of all, I would say, get yourself prepared, right? Because opportunity is going to come at you so fast at times that you may not feel like, oh my gosh, if I had just done this or done that or whatever. So just get yourself prepared. But don't think that because you quote unquote are not prepared that you shouldn't go.
Yes.
Because what I've found is that, particularly when I interview men and women, but particularly women will second guess every single one of their skill sets. While with men, they'll just make the stuff up. Be like, it's like, well, no, right? So to the men, I'm not trying to, at all push you to the side, but I'm just saying my observation is that as women, we tend to just second guess and want everything to be right. And, maybe I don't have enough of this or enough of that. Just stop. You are absolutely enough. So if you don't hear anything else in this, when you look in the mirror and you're second guessing yourself, I want you to say, I, in this moment, am absolutely enough. Enough. So that's number one. I have to tell myself that, because you do, you do sometimes like, you're enough. You're enough. Absolutely. The second thing I would say is, so that self-talk is important. That's the takeaway from it. The second is to seek first to understand.
Yes.
We don't always have to be the loudest. We don't always have to clamor. Seek first to understand. So in those quiet moments when you're sitting, when you're absorbing, some of us might be a little bit more outgoing than others. Whatever it is your personality is, embrace it. For me, I seek first to understand, because I really believe in authentic relationships. I don't need to be in relationship with everyone, nor do I really want to be. But, people ask me all the time, are you on Facebook? Are you on this? I said, no, if I'm in relationship with you, you know, but that's just a personal choice, right? That's not for everybody. What you do for a living, you need to do those things. For me, I don't feel like I need to at this point, because I really focus in from a strategy perspective. Seek first to understand you are absolutely enough. And then being prepared for those moments, right? I'm a researcher. I'm a nerd. I'm in my office right now. If I was to have this camera to span, I have probably 5 or 6 bookshelves filled. And when I say filled, I mean almost like double filled. Like when you have the book, it's bad. It's bad.
Yeah.
But that's me, right? But the strategy for me has always been to seek knowledge, seek to understand, be prepared. Don't tell yourself no. And more than anything else, Jermaine, you are absolutely enough. Kim, you are absolutely enough.
I love that. I love that self-talk and the importance of that. And you know what? We're not even halfway through, listeners, and I'm thinking there's so many drop the mic moments that she's already created through this conversation. But again, what I want you, and maybe you're just starting out on your journey, to understand that is what experience has brought to her, and is where she is and accepting of herself. And I hope that you all will give yourselves a chance and give yourself grace. That's the other part, is that you can start anew. So I love that. I love that, Jermaine. Man, this is good conversation. So when I think about your, in your role as CEO of the Urban League of Broward, what have been some of the most significant challenges that you've encountered in that role, and how have you turned those into opportunities? Because it goes back to this whole conversations of like using the lemons that you've been dealt to make some lemonade. So how have you done that?
And I make sweet lemonade, so we do this. Lemonade and iced tea. It's got to be sweet. Let's not play. And no powdered stuff either. I would say that when I think about looking at how to overcome, those challenges and the like, I loved what you said about giving yourself grace, because that's the thing. I think initially in my journey, I didn't give myself enough grace.
Yeah.
If it messed up, it just stayed on me. It just felt heavy, and it
You were
just
wearing it
stayed.
like a coat or a skin.
No, it was like I was wrapped up in it like a cape,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I had to learn that. So I definitely agree with you in terms of, being able to give yourself grace and moving that forward. I think some of the greater challenges that I've faced coming into the role and even now, um, one is people, particularly earlier when I was seen as
Yeah.
much younger. Um, I actually had a person say, "Are you even old enough to be in the room?" I was just like, "What? Where is this coming from?" Right? And then you have to give that like uncomfortable chuckle, like because
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
really don't want to say the word in your head. So first of all, people really accepting the fact that as a woman, and for those of you who might be younger in your career, don't despise, don't let others despise your youth.
Yes.
Okay. There is a perspective that is necessary from your lens. With that said, there's also opportunities for you to listen and to learn. So you got to figure out that right balance, because if you come in thinking and feeling and showing off like you are the best and the brightest and the only thought leader at the table, you're probably not going to be attractive or very attractive to others. So you got to figure out your right balance, in that. And I think if you take the cues from around the table, you'll know how to do that particular dance across the board. So that's number one. I found that initially to be a challenge, and I had to learn that. The second thing I would say was a challenge for me is really deciding and knowing what type of business acumen I needed to sharpen. So I knew I was really good at being able to talk about the mission of the organization, programmatically where it is that we needed to go. But to be honest with you, the area that I wasn't as sharpest in really had to deal with financial acumen.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time now, I said, this complexion looks beautiful in orange, but no orange jumpsuits, no orange jumpsuits. Okay. For the listeners who are international, orange jumpsuits would mean that you're going to jail. So we don't do that. Okay. So I decided to really sharpen my acumen in that area by going to classes. Right. So I already had a bachelor's degree. I already had a master's degree. I already had a doctorate degree at this point. But I knew enough to know that I wasn't sharp enough in that area. And I went back to school and just took some classes, in that area. So whatever it is that you think you're not as sure footed, don't let somebody else tell you. You already know. Go get the education, go get the knowledge. It's not going to cost you, much of anything,
Yeah.
and move forward from there.
I love that the whole piece, and also in our conversations, it's been about prior podcasts about learning for life. That it's not, a stop and then you're done. You got your credential. It really is learning for life. And I love that self assessment that you talked about as well, where you figure it out first. No one has to tell you, and you take that action and move forward from that point. I will say to you, I want to pose this question because through some of the other podcasts, the conversation has been around that, regardless of kind of what tack you take as a woman leader, whether it's listening to understand or feeling compelled that you got to put your voice on everything, that it's a bigger balance than if you were perhaps a male going into that same space. Have you experienced that same thing? Which you, I think so, because you mentioned it. Kind of the second guessing that we inevitably do. How were there tips and tricks that you can kind of share as kind of your go-to, like when you found yourself in that moment and you're trying to figure out, I'm in a room and I'm not only the youngest, but I'm the only one of anything, whether it's color, whether it's, gender, whatever that only one is. We've all felt that. How
Yeah.
did you kind of psych yourself up to say, okay, let's move forward?
So I'm going to tell you a trick.
Yes.
And now the whole world will know. So when I do this, they will know. So when I feel uncomfortable, right, you have a choice. You could either lean into the discomfort, or you can shy away from it. Those are choices, right, that you can make. And I'll answer it from two different ways. So internal to the organization, when I felt discomfort. So internal to my company, my popsicle stand, that which I'm leading, right?
Yes.
I realized that my voice is the final voice, is the strongest voice. So I have a general rule that if I feel upset, annoyed, angered, frustrated by something that really doesn't need an immediate response, and the only thing to me that needs immediate responses are life and death. And I don't deal in life and death. I'm not a doctor,
Yes.
right? So I will take a 24-hour rule and go home. And if it still bothers me the next day, then I will speak about it. But if I wake up the next morning and it's gone, it's gone. I'm moving
I
on to
love
the
it.
next thing. Because in the internal part of it, depending on how you lean into that, is going to define who you are. And I'm going to take a pause here, and maybe this is something that could be helpful for the listeners.
Mhm.
Very early on, I was very afraid of conflict, but I didn't know to call it that, right?
Right.
I would avoid it. And I would avoid it by going into meetings and Kim just blasting everybody, right? And of course, when you go in there blasting everybody, the person that you really wanted to have the conversation with, they ain't listening.
Right.
They're not talking to me. But the individuals who you really aren't talking to, they're absorbing all of this energy, this
Yes.
negative energy from you as a leader. So I
Yes.
finally had to wrap my mind around when a person came to me and they said, "Wow, you really took out your AK-47 on us today." And I was like, "What?
Yeah.
I want to be an AK-47,
Yeah.
blazing
Yeah.
gun kind of leader." So that night, I went home and I did something that I do with my staff annually. I wrote my leadership eulogy. What do
Wow.
you want people to say about you when you no longer have a voice to defend it? And
Wow.
I wrote my leadership eulogy, and I challenge your listeners to write it. Because when you write that, nobody writes a eulogy of all the horrible things that a
Yes.
person has. It's always the accolades, the great things, even if they got to dig real deep to find it.
Yeah.
Positive things. Maybe they might throw a little joke in there here and there, but it's generally positive, right? As
Right.
a leader, when you write your leadership eulogy, what do you want people to say about you in that company when you are no longer there? It will
Wow.
change the way in which you act, think, and speak on a daily basis, because that is the only way that they will be able to write and concur with whatever the eulogy is when you're gone. So that's what I tend to do internally, to really think about that and go back to that leadership eulogy. And it has really served me well over the
Yeah.
last 18 years as CEO. I go back to it and I read it, and it's morphed and changed over the years. So that's that. On the other side, when I'm in an external situation, sitting around a table where I might be the only person, and I'm feeling that discomfort that we always feel,
Right.
that we may at times, I should say, feel. I sometimes just get up from the table. Honestly, I do this, Kim. I
Yeah.
will go into a restroom. That self talk is real.
Yeah.
Take a deep breath. I am enough. I am completely enough, and I am whole. And I do a little prayer and I said, "Lord, let whatever the words that's about to leave my mouth have the impact that you will want to have." And I go back into the room and I sit down and just let whatever come out, come out. And it has never failed me yet. So that's what I do.
That is so beautiful in so many different ways. The leadership eulogy, just the self-talk and how powerful it is. And regardless of where you are on the faith spectrum, I am a faith, so I know just what it can do and what it has done. That really making sure that you're connecting with that and that you're very much reflective, because again, we don't always, well, we don't see ourselves as others see us. We think we do, but we don't. And so the best advice that you can get is, perception is reality. I've heard that and I was like, you're exactly right. I mean, how people perceive, that is their reality. So if you want to do something about that, and I love how you moved in that space. Is there anything that you have learned over, let's say, the last, decade or 2 decades, that when thinking about your 20-year-old self, and I'm thinking about the young women that are listening right now and they're like, oh, my career, and what am I going to do? What would you tell yourself? Would it be the self-talk that you taught yourself now? What advice would you give that 20-year-old self?
Yeah. So I would say I'm thinking
Yeah.
because 20, I actually came into the role of vice president around 23, 24. So
Uh-huh.
I had the opportunity to really start this leadership journey very young, probably
Oh,
younger than most.
yeah.
And I would say that to my 20-year-old self, and for those, let's just say for the younger listeners,
Uh-huh.
I would say to you that be patient. Be patient enough to see the opportunities. I have a plaque that says opportunity is missed by most people because it comes dressed in overalls and work, right? You're gonna have to work. You're gonna have to work. And is not, you just can't be the person at times. I mean, different cultures, different office cultures, organizational cultures are different. So you got to keep your pulse on that. But you may not have the privilege of being in at 9 and leaving at 3,
Yeah.
For those of us who are now working remotely,
Yeah.
that's a whole different level of trying to figure out how, as a woman, you're going to navigate those places and spaces. Because I know, and Kim, you I'm sure know this too, is that we got tapped for opportunities because people saw us.
Yeah.
It was just like, oh, she's really good at that. Maybe I should have her do this. But if people
Yeah.
aren't seeing you and seeing your work, you're going to have to really figure out strategy as to how to move it. The other thing I would tell my younger listeners here is write the vision. Write the vision that you have for yourself, particularly women. And if you're a single woman, in particular, at that age and stage, write your vision for your entire life, not just your professional life, but for your entire life. And when you come into partnership with anyone, personally or professionally, you share that vision. Because at the end of the day, if they cannot align up with your vision, you're wasting time. And it
Yes.
doesn't mean that your direction is the only direction, but your direction is the one that you want. And with of sharing that vision, then you'll go down any path that somebody will take you, right?
Yeah.
So it's really important. I think that that's what I would want to say. Like if you're younger, take the time, meditate on it, stop moving so fast, put the phone down, and just be meditative, prayerful, whatever terms you want to use, and get those words down for what does the future 10-year from now, Jermaine, 10-year from now, Kim. And it doesn't matter if you're 20, if you're 30, 40, 50, 60, whatever decade you're finding yourself in, write the vision, make it plain, and not just make it plain for yourself, you make it plain so that other people can help you run with it. That's the key.
So beautiful, so beautiful. Oh, again, drop the mic yet again. I don't know how many mics. I think we're going to run out of mics on this one because it's just so beautiful. And listeners, I know
You're
that
so
you
easy
will,
to talk to.
will want to share and certainly subscribe because this is what we're about at Say More. So when we think about the Urban League of Broward County, it's dedicated to elevating the standard of living for families. I love that, in underserved urban communities. How do you ensure that your leadership is aligned with this mission?
Yeah, that goes back to the origin story. Once you know
Mm-hmm.
your own story, it's easy to do this work, right? So, as much as I've had a lot of opportunity, a lot of access, and very much a lot of privilege as a result of being in this role, affiliated with a national organization, I still remember that government cheese does not melt.
Yes.
Still remember the big block of cheese, the generic cans of evaporated milk, and all the things that came with being embarrassed of using food stamps when we would go
Yes.
to the grocery store. Um, Still, I grew up in government housing, remembering when I was younger, it didn't feel like a stigma. But then when you realize there was a difference between where you lived and other people lived, you're just
Right.
like, oh. But my parents, hardworking, um, people filled with integrity and pride and so forth, never made us feel less than. My mom, a master seamstress, Kim, anything that she could see, she could sew,
Oh
period.
my gosh.
First, like prom or like, let's say party dress was made out of curtains, literally
Wow.
curtains. She
Wow.
made it out of baby blue curtains, go figure. I use that because it helps me stay grounded in the mission of the organization, of this organization in particular.
Yes.
Because when we think about equity and equality and the access for children and families to be able to build wealth in its broadest term, spiritual wealth, financial wealth, mental wealth, emotional wealth, workforce, opportunities and the like, because I know that part of my story and I know this part of my story and the opportunities that my children have, because
Yes.
I can stay grounded, in this mission. And when sometimes things may not always work out the way that I would like it to, or in community development or economic development, where we may not necessarily be able to get a grant, for example, or we build affordable housing, sometimes not in my backyard, is quite loud and real. I
Yeah.
go back to my origin story and I tell the story. And I say, I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for the 10-year-old Jermaine. So that helps
Oh,
me stay grounded.
oh, I love it, and you're such a great storyteller. I mean, you really are, I mean, and painting the picture. I mean, I absolutely. So you certainly pick when I think about the many paths that we sometimes take when we're trying to figure out that first degree. I was a psychologist. I was going to be a pharmacist. It's all these different paths that we take, but I certainly believe that you landed on the right one because it's such a skill of yours. When you think about particular initiatives, because you've been with the Urban League for some time now, what's that initiative or program that you're most proud of and its impact that it's had on your community?
Wow. So I'm going to give you two. One is a
Okay.
future, and I'll tell you that we have. So I'm sitting in a building that's 28,000 square feet, our office building, and I say that it's an initiative that I'm proud of because everybody told us that we couldn't do it.
Oh.
So that's the first thing. Tell me I can't do something. I was like, no,
That's
we're
our
going to try it.
license to do it, right?
Exactly. And the reason why it's not about the building. It's not about the physical structure. It is about the message that it sent to our local community about what Black led, Black serving, Black focused organizations can do when we
Yes.
all come together and move something forward. So my internal, every year, I pick a theme for the year. And this year, our year starts July 1, so it's very recent, is the power of we, the power of we. And it really generated from a comment that was made by one of our colleagues, one of my staff members here. And when she said it, it just struck my soul in such a way that I'm like, that's it. I didn't have it before, but that's what it is. So, from an initiative perspective, I'm sitting in a facility that they told us that we could not build, that we would not raise the money for, that we could not have. But yet, we did it in 2012. It is a signature building in Broward County next to our African American Research Library, sitting on the historic Sistrunk Boulevard. It is a place where we have convened governors, state attorneys. We have convened the best and the brightest within our community. It's a place where um, people who feel down and out can come and get served and be seen. So we've run the spectrum. If we had stayed where we were before, behind a no name gas station,
Right.
in a place where nobody would have found us, we would not be the Urban League of Broward County coming into our 50th year next year.
Wow.
2025 is our 50th year. So I'm proud of it, not because of the physical building, even though it's beautiful. I'm proud of it because of the statement that it's made in this community, and it continues to make as a signature place for people of color to be able to come and be a part and be thought leaders, and that list goes on and on. So that I'm proud of. The future is even brighter, Kim.
Oh my
So
goodness.
it's brighter. So we have the opportunity to construct a 469 residential units of housing affordability in Broward County.
Oh
It
my
will be
gosh.
the largest, it will be the largest affordable housing community in Broward County's history to date. 20 acres of property under the control of a social impact organization, the most number of acres for any social impact nonprofit organization in Broward's history. I am excited about this. Again, not because of 469 mid-rises,
Yeah.
townhomes, villas, but because what it means to be able to create an opportunity for families to build wealth, for seniors to age in place with dignity and respect, and to be able to add value to a Black middle neighborhood. That's a term that they use now, Black middle neighborhoods, to help it to be revitalized in a way that will be catalytic for that community and for the surrounding community. We're building it in the city of Oakland Park. We are completing our entitlement process. We'll be breaking ground in 2025. I am excited for the opportunity to do so.
That just takes my breath away, and it takes my breath away, and it leaves you speechless because really it speaks to so many different pieces. I think about the individual served and the statement that it makes, because when you're hidden and, as you mentioned, behind the gas station, sometimes individuals, it's very hard where they're going to receive help and uplifting thoughts to see that, well, I don't know how much they can uplift me because they need to be uplifted themselves. And the fact that
Amen.
you create this bigger than and beyond, I think it's the perfect statement to share with our listeners about, really seeing beyond. And sometimes you're seeing by yourself, but see, you must. And that's what Jermaine has done, and her organization and her board of directors. I mean, it's the power of belief and carrying out, as you mentioned, the WORK. Nothing comes without the work, but that is so powerful. And as I think about now moving into the housing space and just how big that is a statement for your organization, really, it's reflective of urban leagues across the nation, the work that you're doing, and the power of social impact organizations. I mean, it is monumental. So it makes me want to, listeners, you can't see this, but literally I'm like touching my shoulders and I'm like, hey, I want to pull on the pair of overalls and be a volunteer. It makes you want to be a part of something bigger than yourself. So thank you for sharing.
Thank
One, thank you
you.
for your leadership, your vision. Thank you for that 10-year-old you that knew that you wanted to do. And I think about your mom. I see your mom and you, where you talked about where she could take anything and it becomes something. And I see
Mhm.
that through your hand, through your work, and just what you've committed yourself to. So such powerful examples, and I
Thank you.
personally want to continue following up on that and seeing what I can do to make sure that everyone hears and knows about it. Oh, amazing, amazing Hallmark moment.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for that encouragement. We all need to be encouraged. So
We
thank you
have
so much.
to. We have to. And that, again, listeners, is a power of what a network of women supporting women and the work that they're doing. No one loses any ground. We gain ground when we elevate and celebrate the success of one another. I mean, it's lifting us all up. We all feel inspired. So thank you for that inspiration.
Oh,
When you
thank you
think
so much.
about, I'm thinking about, how many great things that your organization has done, and you've really successfully positioned not only Greater Fort Lauderdale in the work that you're doing there within our state, but now I'm thinking about how you've used that as a platform, to leverage it on a more broader scale and thinking about nationally. So talk about that and how that national piece fits in.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, as I shared earlier, the Urban League is a part of a national network of urban leagues, right? There are 90 urban leagues across the United States. And as I shared, 8 in the state of Florida. So we have the opportunity to be a part of an organization that has been around since 1910. So if you think about the trajectory of communities since 1910 to 2025, people often ask, well, is the Urban League still relevant in 2024, 24, 25, as we talk about fiscal years? And I would say yes. I said, ask the person who has come just a couple weeks ago. We had a career fair here in our building, over 500 individuals coming through. Ask them if the Urban League is still relevant. For the individual who comes to our home buyer education classes and is able, as a result of that, to not only understand the process, but also then be able to move through to purchase their home and be able to build wealth for their families in that way. Ask them if the Urban League is still relevant. Or the young person who just came off of one of our college tours and now has made a decision around, yeah, college is for me. Everybody told me that it wasn't, but I can be here. I see myself here. Ask them and their families if Urban League is still relevant. So that national platform that we have, using this national brand to either bring attention to issues like community and economic development, bring attention to issues like diversity, equity, and inclusion, to bring attention to issues such as maternal health and the like. We have the privilege and the opportunity to use the brand to be able to uplift those challenges and attract national, state, and local philanthropy, as well as federal and government dollars to what it is that we're doing, and to be socially enterprising. So it's also about creating those business lines within the work so that we're able to generate revenue for ourselves. So even as I talk about the 469 unit development, that is something that urban leagues are doing across this nation. We happen to be doing the largest one here. The Miami Urban League does a phenomenal job with that. The Palm Beach Urban League does also. Again, I can list so many of them that are doing that work. But again, it's that national presence that we're then able to use that platform to uplift.
Oh my goodness. So when you think, I'm thinking about all of this work and all of the great things that are happening. And one of the things that, over certainly COVID did have some silver linings that it brought with it, and was the focus on self-care. So because it's, demanding job and great things are happening. How do you balance, you talked about disconnected, but maybe I'll ask you to spend a little bit more time on balancing professional commitment with personal life. And, because it certainly can be challenging. How have you managed to balance that? And perhaps it's been a journey. Like, what practices, would you share with listeners, because I know it certainly had to probably evolve over time.
Yeah, it's definitely evolved over time. And I'm going to give some very, very practical tips.
Sure.
So, one, I do time blocking. I block my calendar 6 months in advance. So January to June, July to December. My children are now older, 21 and 17. I'm going to be an empty nester in about a year. My daughter is a senior in high school. But when they were younger, and not driving in particular, I would block out all of their school schedules, so their holidays, so forth and the like, and I block it. And I block it because, particularly as a CEO, I don't control all of my own time. Right. So I had to learn ways of how to control my calendar. So the first block starts with family. What am I blocking out to be able to be with them, or at least not have the stress of trying to figure out, oh crap, I forgot that they had this and so forth. So the other thing is that I go through, so once I start time blocking there, then I create what I call do not disturb time. So in the course of the week, I will block out in a day 3-4 hour blocks of time. And that might be 3 or 4 blocks in the entire week. And people are like, how in the world do you block out 3, 4 hours? And it could end up being like 12 hours blocked out in a week. I
Yeah.
said, well, why wouldn't I? Because if I don't block it, everybody else will take it. And then
Correct.
I'm the one going home with the work at night, the activities that need to be done, so forth and the like. Because going from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, all that's getting added is things to my to-do list, right?
Correct.
So as a result of that, my assistant and everybody on my team knows that if it's D&D, it's blocked out in red. They have no permission to take that time unless they ask me. So you
Correct.
got to then set up rules for your time blocking. Okay. So time block and set up rules around the time blocking. Then third, I have a sign that I put on my door that says, I'm working on my one thing. And this is what it means. It's actually from a book called The One Thing. It's a really good book. You should read it. But it is a opportunity for us as leaders to understand there's certain things that only we can do. If I'm asking somebody for $1 million, they don't want to hear from my assistant. They don't want to hear from a vice president. No, 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 no. They want to hear from you. So the question
Exactly.
is I'm always asking myself, did I make my $1 million ask today? It could
Wow.
be really simple. It don't have to literally be $1 million,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes it is, believe that. But it is whether or not you are making that one thing ask, that $1 million task. And if I put that sign out, the only way you knock on that door is if death is approaching. And they know that. And I'm not a doctor, a medical doctor, so I'm not dealing with death. So y'all need to figure it out on the other side of the door.
I
Um,
love it.
so we're able to, do the time blocking, the disconnect, learning how to do that. I've actually learned also how to put my email on pause when I'm
Yep.
disconnected, because I have no discipline when it comes to it. And I recognize that if I see an email, I want to respond to it. So I had to
Yes.
come up with a way that the emails don't even come into my box. So I pause my email and then unpause it at certain times. Like if I'm on vacation,
Yes.
things like that, I will pause the email. And then thirdly, I would say is that you have to empower people around you.
Yes.
It will get done. It may not be the way you want it done. It may not be how and when, but it'll get done and it will be okay. So I tell them all the time, I said, listen, I'm leaving. I'm out of here. If the building burns, call the police department and the fire department, and I'll see you on my way back. No need to call me. Don't even know, right? I'll see it when I get back. But of course, that's the extreme joke. But the idea more is the empowering of the people around you to do the work, to hold them accountable to the work, and then being able to correct them in that process with care and understanding so that they can trust you enough to be able to feel like they can be empowered to go out and do it.
I love that. So many great nuggets there. And again, this is an episode. Not only am I going to encourage, and I've already done it once, share with our listeners and encourage them to hear at least twice. I'm going to do that myself because I'm in the moment now as we're recording, but I absolutely want to make sure because there's so many memorable points that you're like, hey, I want to take note of that. And it also highlights for me the importance of learning from each other. Our
Yeah.
journeys are not our own. They really are to share. And that
Yeah.
is what we're doing by way of this platform, sharing what we've learned so that you can avoid some of what we learn. And, you don't have to bump your head to know what that pain feels like. We've already done that perhaps, and we want to share with you. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And so when I think about all of what we've talked about, and I have an idea in my head, but you will certainly confirm this. Who has been the biggest inspiration or mentor in your career, and what valuable lesson did they impart to you?
Wow. I have a lot. I have a lot of people, but I would have to go back to my origin story. Uh, my parents have been phenomenal inspirations for me. And I say that because not only because they are my parents. I mean,
Yeah.
that's clear when we're here without them, right? But the fact that they had, there's nothing about their story that should put me in the position that I'm in today, right?
Right.
No silver spoons, none of that. My parents are hardworking individuals. They worked for everything that they had and have, but they taught me a few lessons. One, don't ride the highs too high or the lows too low. You got to live this life. You're going to have your peaks and you're going to have your valleys. You don't need to stay on either one of them because something's happened, right? That's number one. Number two, for my mom, you said it earlier, and I'm so glad you picked up on it. Like she just knew how to make something out of little, right? I won't even say nothing, just out of little. She
Yeah.
knew how to take curtains and make it into a beautiful dress, right?
Yeah.
She would know how to take flour, water, oil, and make it into something that would be edible and that we would want to eat, that
Yeah.
type of a thing. She never allowed us to feel any less than in any way, shape, or form. We were very proud. She was very proud in that way. From my dad, I learned how to laugh. Like life is not that, like you make it through, okay? But just to laugh, hard work pays off, and just to keep it, to just keep life moving. That you, no need to hold hostility and anger and all of that. So people laugh at me all the time. Folks can, in essence, yell at me, almost call me outside of my name, and I'll be like, "Are you done? Okay." So now what it is that we need to do, right? I can compartmentalize very well because we got to stay focused on mission. We got to stay focused on what it's about because it's not about us. It's about the people we serve, the people and the generations that are to come. And when we can put our egos off to the side and focus, that's what becomes important. And I think that's what my parents really taught me a great deal. Ego is not that important. All of us have it. But if you're going to center it, then that becomes your challenge.
Oh my goodness. So I mean, I'm in love with mom and dad and I've never met them. I mean, it's just again so much that they've done and just the value of just kind of pouring that into you and I'm certain your siblings as well.
Yeah.
Last question, but I will share with the listeners wholeheartedly. This Say More virtual door is always open to you. We want you to come many times more to share and give us updates and to inspire because that's what you've been, an inspiration, an encourager, and just a snapshot of just the power of great leadership and the power of stories. So, what yeah. Why is it important for women to invest and support other women? I think, I think that's probably the best way to close it out because that's what we're committed to.
Yeah. I mean, look at what you're doing, Kim. I mean, you're creating a platform for me to share my personal story, to be encouraging to other women and other women, period, women as leaders in whatever aspect, whether it's within their families and their homes, within their communities, within their workplaces. So, I mean, the way that you're doing this, I just want to commend you for that and opening up your time, your talent, and your treasure to make this happen. I have a saying that I share that in the company of women, magic happens. And I believe it.
Wow.
I believe magic happens when we open up ourselves and we open our stories. There's so much, I believe, that we are conditioned to be shameful or shamed about that really isn't. It's just a part of your story, right? Now, there are parts of your story that you may not willingly just gush out to millions of unknown individuals, right? But I think all of us go through whatever aspects of our story for somebody at some point, right? And you will know the point to share that particular part of your story. So some things are very open, very able to just share generally. And then there are those personal points where it's like, it's not for everybody, but it's for somebody at some
Yes.
point. And that's where the magic happens, right? Is the magical moments of knowing when to share and so forth. And I've had the personal privilege of being able to do just that, to share the really, really deep personal parts of who I am as a woman, one on one with other women, to just be able to give them encouragement. And frankly, there are times I'm like, oh my God, I just can't believe I just told this person that. What if else, whatever. But then in that same moment, I get reassured in my spirit that you didn't go through that for you. You did it for this person. And if they want to share it in a way that may or may not be complimentary, it doesn't matter. It's a part of my story and it's the truth, right? So as long as we keep telling our truth, telling our stories, sharing them with authenticity, I believe that's how we're able to really support other women. We have to get into the place and space not only of mentoring other women and being able to coach other women, but being sponsors for other women. And being so when they are not in the rooms, when they're not in the spaces that we happen to now take up that space, that we're able to raise the flag and be like, do you know Dr. Moore? I had the opportunity to just meet with her and talk with her. I think that she would be a phenomenal person for ABC or XYZ. Again, the more we do that, the more that we create place and space for others, men and women, the greater you become in your own way. And I think your leadership eulogy then is written for you in ways that you would never be able to comprehend.
There again, I can't thank you enough for being a guest. I will share with you listeners, so many people said, you've got to talk to her, you've got to talk to her. And as soon as this podcast ends, there are text messages going out and saying, you are exactly right. It has been the treat of just my life to have this conversation and talk to you and hear more about your story, your journey. Thank you for sharing it with our Say More guests. We and listeners, we certainly could not do it without you. You are a powerful leader and one that we will be sending, great support and well wishes behind not only what you've done, but certainly what you're doing in the future. And Say More listeners, thank you for choosing to tune in, download the podcast, making it possible that we would be international, caring about the stories and journeys of others, and choosing to download and share and like. It's powerful. We're doing it together, and we will do other great things together, and that's changed lives. So thank you for joining us, and I certainly look forward to the next podcast.